DSW, Designer Shoe Warehouse, is the one-stop shop for all your footwear needs. With sneakers, boots, and everything in between, for every style, mood, and occasion, you'll definitely find shoes that get you at prices that get your budget. DSW has what you need, but more importantly, they have what you didn't even know you wanted. You never know what you'll find at DSW. Find the shoes that get you at prices that get your budget at DSW stores or dsw.com.
This is a message for anyone who's ever felt like their bra was just fine. Third Love is here so you don't have to settle for good enough. A company founded by women just like you who know what struggling to find a bra feels like. For over 10 years, they've been redefining what a comfortable bra looks and feels like, focusing on innovative design and high-quality materials. We're talking about bras, yes, bras, made with thoughtful details to solve common problems. Want to stay cool and comfortable all day? Third Love offers innovative thermoregulating fabric that has you covered. Looking for a little extra lift? Need smoothing? Even need to add a cup size? They've got it. And the fit? It's unmatched. Third Love believes everyone deserves a bra that fits perfectly, which is why they offer over 60 sizes from AA through H. They even have exclusive half cup sizes, which means if you're in between sizes, you can get a perfect fit every time. Stop settling for average bras. Get solutions made for your body. Get $15 off your perfect fit bra at thirdlove.com with code podcast15.
So in the same way that we need to take action and activate in politics and vote, investing in the stock market is exactly the same. We are not going to understand how the system works until we begin to invest into it, get behind a company, understand how that company works and how it's impacting the economy, the global economy. And so these are two of the most important systems in the United States of America, and our lack of participation is only enriching the top 1%. And that is true for politics, and it is also true for the stock market. Welcome back to another episode of Investies. I'm your host, Linda Garcia, Texas State Representative and author of the book Wealth Warrior. This week on the podcast, I am going to be interviewed with Eliza. We are going to talk about what I did over the weekend, as well as getting into what is happening with interest rates and some of the action steps that you can take today. If you want a daily dose of economic content, join us over on Patreon with the opening bell, where you will receive doses of what is taking place in real time in the stock market and surrounding the economy. Join us at patreon.com/investies.
Okay, Linda, you were on the road this weekend. Can you tell us what you were up to and why you were in San Antonio?
Yeah, so we had an annual event from our Mexican American Legislative Caucus, where we gather every year, raise money, have panels. It was my first experience, so I've never been to this before. And it was a great time. I got the opportunity to interview OpenAI, which was really cool. I was super geeked about that.
Who did you talk to at OpenAI?
So I got to talk to Cassandra Solis, and she's young, and I am so excited to connect with her again. I'm hoping that we'll have her on Investies. She has the most incredible resume. I didn't know anything about her, and so everything was moving so fast. I didn't get her introduction until a couple of minutes before I got on stage. And when I read her introduction, like when I read her, what is it called?
Like her CV or her resume or something?
Yeah. It's like what you use to, her bio. When I read her bio, I was just She's the chief of staff for the chief economist at OpenAI, but she supports economic implications of artificial intelligence and its intersection with policy. She worked at Google, where she measured evidence-based technology that enabled impact and initiatives. As a program manager, she worked at the Federal Reserve. I mean, this woman is incredible. She is just so cool. So, I was like freaking out over her.
I know. I feel like you getting to talk to someone who was at the Fed must have been very, very exciting.
That was the highlight. When I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah, it was so cool. She worked on inflation specifically.
Wow.
Yeah, she said it was really boring because there was no inflation back when she worked.
It would be a different story if she was working there right now. I'm sure her job would be high intensity, high stress if she was working there now. It sounds like she's working on some really cool stuff in terms of how AI is going to impact the economy. I'm curious, how do you feel after that conversation? How do you feel about how AI is going to intersect with your work for your constituents?
So one of the things that we focused on during our conversation, because we are the Mexican American Legislative Caucus, and that's just a really outdated name to be completely transparent, so I don't want to mislead anyone. It's really a Latino caucus. It started back in the 70s, where the original folks that started it were Mexican American, and they were the first to become part of legislation, become legislators in Texas. So we were focusing on how AI was going to impact jobs, specifically Latino jobs. And I have to say that I think I really didn't reach the clarity that I was looking for. And, I know that we kind of talked about it a little bit, like how much is OpenAI going to be able to discuss through these conversations. And so I really wasn't able to sink my teeth into anything. And I think I came down to the conclusion that I don't know that we really know the impact, and I don't know that we will be able to measure it. Specifically, they said that in their data, they don't break anything up based on nationality or race. So they don't have data that is being gathered in that way. They also said that what they have begun to notice is that when people get let go because AI is going to be able to execute their job, that they're seeing data is showing them that within a month or two, that job is sourced back out again.
To people,
correct. So it's really looking like it has to be a partnership between AI and people. So I think the direction that it feels like we're moving in is that we will have to know how to use AI in the same way that we had to learn how to use the internet and email and, how to best Google or any application that any of us are working with. That's the way it feels. And maybe we'll be able to task things out to AI, but there still will have to be someone managing and making sure that what their goals are being properly executed.
It seems almost like the companies who are like laying people off because they're saying, oh, well, now AI can fully do your job. It seems like very often they're wrong. And what really needs to happen is these companies need to be better educated on what AI does and what its limits are, so that, it's so costly to lay someone off and then hire a new person. That's such a waste of money. And it feels almost more like at some point legislators or folks from these really big AI companies like OpenAI or Anthropic, they need to talk to employers and say, hey, it's not as simple as just firing someone because AI can do their job. It's more, there needs to be professional development in the workplace for people to learn how to use AI and become more literate in it so they can apply those tools to their jobs.
That's right. And one of the things that AI is doing right now to try, I think, and mitigate some of that is they have, as of 6 months ago, created OpenAI Academy. So it's a free academy that they offer online, and we can put it in the show notes, the link to the academy. And folks can go in and start learning the most effective way to begin to use AI. One of the questions I asked her is, how are you bridging that gap between letting people know that that resource exists? And so it sounds like, all of this is so new that while they may be working on building partnerships and disseminating this information, it's still very new and a lot of folks still don't know about it. But I did ask questions like, is it going to be accessible in other languages? And she says it is translated via AI, which I do see a language barrier with that in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's exciting. We will definitely drop it in the show notes. And I think it's worth us following up with OpenAI and seeing if they would want to continue the conversation on Investies. So we'll keep everybody posted on that.
Taking on a DIY job around the house is the ultimate summer project. But if your DIY home security system is a beware of dog sign, when your real pet is Princess the cat, that's safe-ish. To be actually safe, help protect your home with a DIY system from ADT. It's easy to install and gives you virtual assistance from ADT's technical support team. Best of all, you can tell everyone in the neighborhood you set it up yourself. Don't settle for safe-ish this summer. DIY with ADT instead. Visit ADT.com to learn more.
A Mochi moment from Sadie, who writes, I'm not crying, you're crying. This is what I said during my first appointment with my physician at Mochi, because I didn't have to convince him I needed a GLP-1. He understood, and I felt supported, not judged. I came for the weight loss and stayed for the empathy. Thanks, Sadie. I'm Myra Ahmed, founder of Mochi Health. To find your Mochi moment, visit joinmochi.com.
Sadie is a Mochi member compensated for her story.
I want to talk a little bit about the money news of this past week. I wonder if in your fireside chat with OpenAI, if you touched at all about the Fed news from this past week, if you even talked about it, and if so, what did you say to each other?
Yeah, so we didn't really talk about interest rates, but I did bring up the BLS report and how we now have a revised version of job growth declining by 1 million instead of increasing by 1 million. And I wanted to talk to her about how much of that she thinks was attributed to AI, which, we weren't really able to get a straight answer, which I totally understand, especially if they don't have the data to back it, or if she doesn't have access to the data that actually tells us, And so we didn't deep dive on that. But I do want to say that obviously we had a big move last week. The Feds did lower interest rates from 4.25% down to 4%. And so in last week's episode, I talked about we're going to see how bad the economy is actually doing based on how Fed Chair Powell decides that we're going to move forward, whether he's going to drop interest rates by 50 basis points or 0.5% or 25 basis points, 0.25%. He only dropped it down 0.25%, which I think is a signal that he feels that the economy overall is still strong. So I think that's some positive news there. However, with that being said, I do want to say that in his conversations and surrounding this topic, there was a conversation about how immigrants, either self-deporting or deporting, has really impacted job reports. And we've talked about this, Eliza, several times on the show in the past years, where we were concerned on how the loss of immigrants was going to impact the economy. So we are starting to see the conversations surrounding that. And I think that it's going to be important for us to pay attention. And I also I don't know if you have any questions pertaining to that, but I do have a really big point that I'd like to bring up today that was just released in the news as of Monday, September 22nd.
I have so many questions for you all the time about money and the economy, but I want you to, while you're on a roll, let's talk about it.
Okay, great. So, what is happening right now is that we actually just watch mortgage rates go up instead of come down. And I want us to unpack that.
That's interesting to me because didn't interest is going down, but mortgage rates are going up,
Yeah.
right? Do I have that right? So how does that work? What's going on?
So, the reason why this is so confusing, because naturally, myself included, when I heard that rates are going to come down and anticipated this drop to happen, I automatically just assumed, like everyone else, that mortgage rates would drop as well. Well, that's not always the case. And it's not often that we see what we are seeing right now. We typically tend to see this type of what we call price action, a movement in price, whether it happens in mortgage or in the stock market. In this case, this price action pertains to the mortgage rates. We see this type of activity when we see high inflation. So the last time this was a normal experience where interest rates are starting to come down, but mortgage rates still continue to go up. This happened last in the 1970s when we also had a massive impact on inflation. So what is happening is that the bond yields, without us getting too much in the weeds on this, I want to kind of just leave it more on a higher level, and we can maybe have an episode where I dig into bond yields more so that we can properly understand. But when we're looking at bond yields not change or move in a different direction from interest rates, what tends to happen is analysts are weary. So the people at the banks that write out mortgages, they are still unsure or have apprehension that inflation is coming down. And so they will continue to increase the rates in order to make sure that they're protecting the mortgage industry as a whole. And they're not lending money to people that may have exposure to increased inflation. So the increased mortgage rates is a way for the mortgage industry to almost safeguard themselves from what we are about to potentially face. All in all, what this tells us is that the mortgage industry does not necessarily agree with rates coming down, which is something that on this podcast I've been very vocal on not agreeing, even though it would benefit me. And now we're finding out it's not going to benefit me because these lower interest rates are mainly going to benefit from a short-term bank-to-bank loan, not necessarily anything that will impact us directly as of right now. It's still early. Things can change. We can get more data and, mortgage rates can come down. But as of now, it's not looking like it.
Does that mean it's going to be harder on like a very basic level for average everyday people to buy a house who want to buy a house?
Well, the idea is that a lot of people were waiting for the Fed to cut interest rates to move into buying a house, selling their house. And it's looking like we're going to have to wait even longer if that is a deal breaker for those wanting to purchase another house. And yes, or, get into their first house. So what's happening right now is that we are seeing a lot of people locked into their homes, which, I bought my home I took advantage of low interest rates. I plan to be here for a really long time, but for some people, maybe they wanted to upgrade. They have, reasons for wanting to buy or downgrade. And we're really not able, we're kind of locked in to the homes that we are because the interest rates are so good. And that puts a stress on supply and demand on the houses that are available for purchase because people just aren't moving. So overall, yes, to answer your question, yes.
So it's going to be a lot more competitive. You're going to be seeing a lot more people because the housing stock is going to continue to go down, which has been a problem since forever. I feel like that's the eternal problem in America. We don't have enough housing stock. And so, okay, so that sounds kind of stressful for anyone who's trying to buy a house right now or sell a house, get out of a house and get into a new one. Okay, so the Fed is dropping interest rates, but how does that affect the rest of us on like a day-to-day basis? Like groceries are still expensive. I'm just like, is it going to impact us positively? I'm just so curious. What do you think?
Well, right now I don't see a positive impact, to be completely honest, because the most positive directly to us. The most positive impact I saw is the ability to borrow money for cheaper, which would be borrowing money in the most obvious cases would be buying a car or buying a home. And so right now that's not currently taking place, right? Interest rates, as we just mentioned, continue to go up despite what the feds are doing. To your point, we are still experiencing inflation. I think if we see any type of relief, it could be interest rates on credit cards that are dropping. I still have to look into that. I haven't looked into that, but I would anticipate that on short-term loans, we could potentially see some drops, which would be on a credit card or maybe just a loan for, a small amount that has to be paid back in a short period of time. So that could be a little bit of a relief there for us if we are looking to borrow money. But again, I think we are still being impacted by inflation. As we talked about in last week's episode with the inflation data, what we really have to understand is that despite inflation going down to 2.9%, which is still 0.9% above the average that we're trying to target, we are still seeing food going up in double digits in the 20% a year, which is a lot. That's very expensive. Our households are not impacted by the 2.9% average. Our households are mainly impacted when coffee goes up and dry food goes up and,
Cost of steak, cost of
yes,
eggs,
exactly.
coffee, and there's wage stagnance. I mean, that's the other thing is that like people aren't getting paid more. So how are they supposed to, everything's just costing more. Something that you and I have been talking about a lot lately is this idea, like we were brainstorming the other day, like if we were to put a name on what you, Linda Garcia, preach to folks every week at Investies, we were going to call it progressive economic populism, or PEP, if you want to be cute about it. I guess when you think about the advice that you give to folks every week here on Investies, we're trying to give people practical advice to build their wealth, especially when times are tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a great time to actually build up your net worth. And I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about that. Like, what are we doing here on Investies to help folks do better in times like this, where it seems like everything just kind of sucks, economically speaking?
Yeah. So I guess I do want to highlight that we are definitely seeing the economic divide grow at a rapid pace, faster than we've ever seen it before. It is now normal to be a billionaire, and we are potentially looking at our first trillionaires, which is ridiculous. Nobody should have $1 trillion.
No one.
And so we're watching that economic divide grow faster and faster, right? Our mission here on Investies is to help folks understand and digest the market in a way that is relatable. And I really, truly feel like we have done that. I think people really need to understand that the foundation of the United States of America is 1000% the economy. And the economy is generated by publicly traded companies. And that is actually positive. And that is what I want to communicate to people, because I understand having the disdain towards big companies that are publicly traded. And I think we have that disdain because we aren't participating and we don't fully understand that publicly traded actually means that you and I can have ownership of the company and we have specific rights that we can vote on, and that us acquiring a piece of that company gives us not only a voice, but if enough of us own the piece of the company, that it also gives us power within the company itself.
I feel like something that you've helped me understand over the past couple of years that we've known each other and been working together is that just because the economy is in a bad place, it doesn't mean that you can't set yourself up for long-term financial success.
Right. Yes. And what is so important about what you're saying right now is that what I really want to drive home, and sometimes I feel like, I may not drive that home enough, is that when the economy is in a bad place, this is actually the time when we can build more wealth for our household, whatever that looks like for us. I think sometimes the term wealth feels so big when we are looking at billionaires and soon to be trillionaires. So it feels like it is not achievable. And I also want to just normalize the word wealth and make it just mean that whatever money we are bringing into our households, we are working on multiplying it and not just working on losing it or spending it on consumerism. And so I think it's really important for us to just take a moment and understand that what we want to do is lean into times like these, investing your time, whether it's listening to Investies or reading a book on financial literacy so that you can further understand how this system works, because it works best when it is in a crisis like this for only those that know how it works.
Right. And I guess the idea behind sort of this idea of PEP or progressive economic populism is if you are here spreading the word on how you can build wealth in crisis, in times of economic crisis, and you're telling everyday people how to do that, who aren't basically white people who have been born into a system where their parents are rich, they know how to make it rich, they can tell you how to make it rich, they can tell you how to invest your money, they can hand you down property that you will come into on your own. You're already set. You're helping people turn their situations around by learning the tricks that old white people who have controlled the economy and the stock market forever, they're just born into knowing this stuff. But what you're trying to do is upend that paradigm and say, you actually just need a little bit of knowledge and you can start upending the paradigm of white supremacy within the American economy and within the American stock market.
That is so spot on. But also, I want us to just pause right here, because as I've been doing this type of work and speaking to more and more people and just understanding the system and being now on the policy side, I think it's really important to know that, yes, the billionaires of the world, they are white, but it is only 1% of the American population or the world. But regardless, in the United States, it is only 1%. So this tells me that the majority of white people also don't have access to these resources and also don't know how to utilize them. That number is getting slimmer and slimmer. So I think it's going to be very important for us to start shifting at the way we look at things and understand that there is most definitely a top versus bottom. And I think the reason we sort of look at it as white folks versus people of color is because the majority of the top is white. But what we have to understand is that the 99%, there is also a big fraction of white folks that don't have the access or the understanding or the knowledge to utilize these resources as well. So I have found that really interesting. And I think that this is going to be a really important conversation as we move into this next election cycle and we try to pull away from white versus Black versus brown and really fully understand that this has to do with top versus bottom.
That's a really cool reframe. And it makes me think that, like, I grew up pretty poor and I'm white. And when I told my dad, like, hey, I'm actually, because of my work on this show, I'm starting to invest. My dad was like, that's great for you, but he has like so much skepticism about investing. And I feel like he grew up in a very poor family and there were 5 kids. And then, he had us and like we became pretty staunchly middle class as I grew up. But I think that because my parents always had this skepticism towards wealth building through the stock market, they never transcended the middle class.
Right. And then also, what is the middle class now? I mean, we look at what the middle class is now and it's families making, I don't know the exact number and I don't want to misquote, but I know it's somewhere around 100 to 130,000 a year. How far does that truly get us and how is that really middle class? I mean, the middle class is completely disappearing. Your dad grew up in a time where he was closer to, what took place in the 1920s with the Great Depression and how the stock market completely imploded and was one of the biggest reasons on how we got into the Great Depression. We then got to see extreme high inflation rates, which your dad was also a part of and got to see. So it makes perfect sense that he has apprehension surrounding, the stock market and participating in that type of wealth development, But I think it is important for us to obviously pay attention. And we try to do that here on the show all the time where we're looking at history. And it's not necessarily that history repeats itself, but it certainly does rhyme. And so we're always looking for patterns from the past to try and learn ways on how to navigate what we are up against and in the future. So yes, there was a lot of poverty during that time experienced by white folks as well. And so, a lot of the times when I have courses or when I speak to people, when I go to talks, I'll have white folks come up with their books and they're just like, I know this book wasn't necessarily written for me, but I never had access to this type of information. And that tells me that the books that I was so intimidated by and it took me so long to read and process and was actually the motivation for writing Wealth Warrior is because this inaccessibility has nothing to do with my level of intelligence of being able to process it or that of my folks of color. It has to do with all of us across the board.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey, it's Paris. I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
I guess on like a very basic level, when we think about like if all of us who are in the 99%, if we were to start becoming shareholders in these huge companies by investing in the stock market, would we actually have the power to upend this intense wealth gap in America?
1,000%. Let me give you just a quick example of the power of a shareholder. The ability to take down a company. We say that publicly traded companies only care about their investors. That is a fact. No one is denying that. I am not denying that. That is a fact. And that's exactly why we need to become investors. That is exactly why we need to become shareholders. When you become a shareholder, you have voting power on the biggest decisions that are made within a company. And if you have issues with the way a company is handling a certain situation, then we are allowed, as individuals, I can write an email to the publicly traded company and say, I am concerned about this DEI program that was taken down, that was benefiting white women, that was benefiting, brown and Black women, and you've removed it, and now we're not seeing the participation from that demographic. These are my concerns. And then they have to, by law, respond to your concerns because you are an investor. And the last thing they want you to do is divest from their holdings. And so imagine the weight of our power if more of us began to invest. Now, I want to give you a very specific example of the power. In 2018, for the publicly traded company Tesla, Elon Musk proposed a pay package that was him saying, I have to meet a number of goals, and if I do not meet these goals, I will not get compensated. And at the time, people laughed at him. All of Wall Street made fun of this compensation package. No one had had a compensation package that said, I will not get paid unless I meet these goals. Elon was getting paid $1 a year, and as he was working to meet these goals for 10 years. During the time that compensation package was made, there was a retail investor. His name was Robert Tornetta. And Robert held 9 shares of Tesla. He voted on this. That's not a lot.
Right?
Nine shares.
Okay, we're talking about a very small amount of shares.
Small amount of shares. We're talking about a little over $1,000 worth a share, if that, okay? And at that time, he got to vote on whether he agreed with this compensation package or not. Those votes are not public information. That's private, so we do not know how he voted. Here's what I will tell you. Fast forward, Elon Musk meets all of his goals, and it is now time for him to get this big compensation package. Well, then we saw people get upset at the compensation package that they once laughed at and said he would never be able to achieve. It doesn't matter which side you sit on, if you're in favor of him, if you're not. I'm here to just explain what takes place next. Robert decides that he has a big problem with this compensation package. My guess is that he once voted against it. He takes this compensation package, gathers other investors, and they file a lawsuit against Elon Musk. And they single-handedly block his ability to get compensated. That is the power of investors.
That's like a real David versus Goliath situation.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, we're talking about one guy with 9 shares versus the richest man in the entire world. One guy gets to decide whether or not Elon Musk is being compensated.
Yeah, I mean, he takes it to court and the judge, he presents his case and the judge decides in Robert's favor.
Wow. I feel like, that is incredible. I guess, okay, so if I were to walk away this week, I actually have started investing because of Investies. If you, Linda Garcia, were to do one thing this week with your portfolio as a newer investor, given everything we've talked about today, mortgage rates, interest rates, the growing wealth gap, trillionaires coming up, I can't even imagine. What would you do today?
Yes. Okay. So I would identify which publicly traded company is one that I use. the most and that I am the most passionate about. This could be the phone you use, the content you're streaming. It just has to be a publicly traded company that you utilize. We are not looking for needles in haystacks. We are not at that level yet. Maybe one day as investors, we develop the understanding to be able to analyze publicly traded companies. But right now, what we are doing is finding 1 or 2 publicly traded companies. I say no more than that because it is going to take a little bit of homework. But if you are a consumer of that publicly traded company and also, your close friends and family members are also consumers of that publicly traded company, and you can step outside your door and throw a rock, and that person is also a consumer of it. It is going to be a company that is not going to fall easily, right? If we go into complete chaos, it's going to be a company that can sustain and will most likely be sustained by the government as well, because we've watched the government sustain publicly traded companies when they're in trouble. We saw it in 2008 when Obama bailed out the banks. And so that is what we're looking for. And I would highly recommend that you take a portion of the money that you have and a very small portion at that, a portion that you can emotionally separate yourself from. You are going to use this as just a test, a way to measure your emotions and your attachment to money. Let's say it's $1,000. You're like, okay, $1,000 is steep, but I can lose it. And I'll use this as what we call market tuition. We're paying tuition to understand how the market works. But really what we're doing is understanding how our emotions work. And you invest that money and you watch it. You watch it and you're just observing on the movements upwards and the movements downwards, but you have begun a position and you commit to yourself that you will keep that money unless something fundamentally changes from the company completely, that you will keep that money in that publicly traded company in order to observe. If the stock market comes down by 20%, meaning that in a couple of months we have a stock market crash, then you dollar cost average and you simply buy more shares, 1 share, half a share, a fractional share, and you continue to add money into the market. What we know about the stock market is that it always recovers. We can look at the stock market all the way back from the 1920s and extend it out, and it is continuously recovering. And so my biggest recommendation and what absolutely changed my life was letting go of my fear, taking the first step of opening a portfolio and investing money into the market.
Okay, so my big takeaway today is if I am tired of seeing people like Elon Musk greedily hoard wealth, if it makes me feel tired and pissed off, what I need to do is choose to be active in my anger, and I need to participate in the stock market.
You know, it is so similar. It's actually parallel with our participation in politics.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah. So in the same way that we need to take action and activate in politics and vote, voting is just, the way I see it in my mind, voting is just 25% of the participation. It's crucial and we need to go out and vote, but it is only 25%. It's also about getting behind a candidate. It is also about investing into a candidate. It's also about knocking doors and helping the candidate, even if it's just 2 hours throughout their entire campaign. But if all of us contributed 2 hours to that campaign and activated in this way, it would certainly make a difference. And so it's also talking to your family members about, going out and engaging and voting and having difficult conversations. Investing in the stock market is exactly the same. We are not going to understand how the system works until we begin to invest into it, get behind a company, understand how that company works and how it's impacting the economy, the global economy. And so these are two of the most important systems in the United States of America, and our lack of participation is only enriching the top 1%. And that is true for politics, and it is also true for the stock market.
Every time we talk, every time I listen to the show, I'm like, okay, mind a little bit blown. I feel like for so many people, it feels so hard to literally find anything in politics, in the economy, which, are wrapped up in each other, and feel like it's going to make a difference, right?
Yes.
I feel like I just see so much apathy in people because things are really scary out there, and that makes people feel nihilistic, apathetic, like it doesn't matter if I vote, it doesn't matter if I do anything, it doesn't matter if I participate because I can't move the needle. But what you're telling me is that that's actually bullshit, and that you actually can participate and you can move the needle, and you can maybe make some money in the process.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, but it's not crazy.
Yeah. They want us to be overwhelmed by the information. They want us to be paralyzed and not be able to take action. And the good news is that you're not responsible for me. That's the good news. That I pledge to you to take care of myself. You pledge to you to take care of yourself. And then we're working in community and we are collectively attacking the 1% where in the ways that we actually can, right? It's voting and it's investing and participating in the free markets.
And just one other thing that I want to say before we wrap up today is the way that they pit us against each other, whether that's along racial lines, whether that's along political lines, is they keep us poor. It's the 1% keeps us poor. And when we don't have enough, we're angry and scared, and we're divided. And that's how they keep us voting against our better interests. That's how they keep us from uniting and going after things like better or free universal health care, better public education. That's how they keep us afraid and scared and polarized, is that they keep us poor.
Yes. Yeah. And I am tired of the racial divide. I just can't do that anymore. I cannot. And I have reached my limit as I engage on the House floor and working in legislation and trying to find solutions to really big problems. I'm done. I can no longer subscribe, and I cannot participate anymore. It has created so much unnecessary hate in my heart that is not serving me. That I had found myself, if someone's wearing an American flag, I automatically think they're racist. And that is not healthy for me to think, that is not healthy for me to participate in. It's not conducive. It does not make me productive. And I can assure you that it will not make me a great politician. And right now, my focus is just on finding solutions. And I am unsubscribing.
Well, I mean, that is beautiful. I think that a lot of white people in America need to step it up and do better and have a lot more compassion and empathy in our hearts for the experiences of people who do not look like us. But I hear you. That's more my job than yours to change that. It's my job to talk to my Trump voting relatives and stuff like that. But I hear you. I really do feel like if they keep us poor, they keep us divided. And who has the time for that? We could be living better lives than what we've got right now. And I think something that you and I want to keep talking about is Trump's version of populism is a lie.
Yes.
Right? It keeps us divided. No one's making more money. Groceries never stop. Groceries are more expensive now than they were this time last year when we were all gearing up to vote.
That's right.
That version of populism is a lie. But what you're talking about is tried and true. you invest however much you can, you do see a return.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yes, you do. And not only do you see a financial return, more importantly, above a financial return is the return on investment you get with your brain, like the way your brain grows. It is science that if we are learning something new, we have neurons that are making new connections. I don't know exactly how all of that works, so I won't get into that. But basically, your brain...
Neuroplasticity, whatever. I don't know.
Exactly. And you're getting smarter. And that is true for me. That is 1000% true for me in my personal experience. And just getting to walk into specific rooms where I'm talking to CEOs of really big companies here in Dallas or in Austin as they're advocating for whatever they're passionate for. And I get to have these conversations, and we're talking about how the economy works and how a publicly traded company is doing, and my mind is growing. And I have to tell you that, just like one last thing, I worked at Lionsgate. And while I was there at Lionsgate, I got to speak to a very powerful CEO who was from Mexico, and he was head of our company, and he would come in continuously, and he was very rich. And one day I asked him, like, what do I have to do? How can I improve? Or what can I do better to make more money and become more wealthy and less worried about my phone bill, for example? And he said, oh, that's easy. You just have to read 2 hours a day of news. And I was like, what? That is the most craziest, absurd thing ever. And I did start reading, but I started reading news on the film industry. Turns out that doesn't translate. And I think what he was talking about was business news. And that just came naturally once I left Lionsgate, went to Netflix, started investing, and then wanted to understand more about what was happening in publicly traded companies. And then my love for the economy grew. And so what I'm trying to communicate is that when you ingest podcasts like Investies or read books like Wealth Warrior and begin to engage on a daily basis and understand what is happening, you by default will in fact become not only more intelligent about the America you live in, but more intelligent about your reaction to the America you live in. And you'll be able to take steps to improve both things: how you feel emotionally about money, how it triggers you, and how the economy triggers you, and then how you can help to make that situation better in your own household. It is so important to not overwhelm ourselves with what all the households in America are doing or not doing. It is important to just solely focus on our own household.
Linda, as ever, such amazing nuggets of wisdom. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you, Eliza, for talking to me. You always make the episodes so much easier.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. I feel like I'm just getting free advice. So we'll just keep on doing this. But we'll be back next week with more information on the economy, the stock market, investing. And Linda, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Investies. If you love the show, please don't forget to head over to your favorite podcast player, rate and review this show. Every time you rate and review, not only are you showing us a token of your appreciation for the episodes that we are producing, but you are also letting other listeners know that the show is worth watching. We appreciate you taking the time to head over, rate, and review. Investies podcast is a Cosmic Standard production. I'm your host, Linda Garcia. A very special thank you to the team, Asia Simpson, Eliza Smith, and Jacob Winnick.